Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dan Nessel Show. I'm your host, Dan Nessel. I was just thinking about community, not my local neighborhood type of community. I mean, community as in a group of people who have something in common that's strong enough to justify forming a collective entity. I mean, whether that community thrives is a whole nother thing. Once you find yourself in a community, I mean, what keeps you there? In other words, what makes a good community good? My guest today might have some thoughts on this. I met him in a community of marketers and communicators who are passionate about the future of our profession, about technology, and about fixing what's broken in our field. Yes, I'm talking about the Rise community again, and my guest is a contributing member who is constantly sharing his perspectives on what is right and wrong with marketing today. He's an Air Force veteran who has had a 20-year marketing career in both corporate and consulting environments. He's a thought leader, strategist, and hands-on practitioner who's not afraid of taking bold positions and getting to the heart of the issues facing our profession. You'll find him on YouTube interviewing top authors and experts, on LinkedIn testing out his ideas and observations, and of course, with his B2B clients, helping them to double or triple their annual growth. He's passionate about the human side of marketing and trust and connection, just like me. I'm looking forward to getting into marketing community, LinkedIn, and more with my rising friend, Aaron Hassen. Aaron, it is good to see you. We've been putting this off for a while. How you doing?
I'm doing awesome. I can't wait to have this conversation. I listen to your podcast, and it's a breath of fresh air for those of us who aren't so interested in short attention spans, but more interested in deep conversations and deep learning.
I don't know whether you're saying my podcast is too long and being polite, or whether you're saying that really that I do have some great guests. I appreciate it. I really do appreciate that, because I am trying to. Well, you know what it is. Let me strike that for a second. I'm not trying. I'm just out there to have great conversations, and I think the not trying is part of it. If that makes sense, right? I'm just doing what feels natural to me, and I really enjoy it. And I thank you for that compliment. And I take it to heart, because I do want people to enjoy what I'm doing and to enjoy my guests, and to hear more about what's happening either in marketing communications or whatever space that's sort of tangential to that. And I'm really glad you're here, because you're a marketer. You've been in the field for a while, and B2B, we don't have a lot of B2B people around. People are often kind of enamored with, consumer goods marketing, or consumer marketing, where things happen quick and fast. B2B is a different animal, right? And it's more of a science, I think.
I think B2B is a bit more emotional, to be honest. You would think it was more scientific, but what I have found, because I've been in these startups, technology-based startups with a lot of venture capital backing and high pressure situations, and while people will tell you, especially technology companies, that it's all about the data, we follow the data, and we go from there. The truth is that there's a lot riding on these companies, these leaders inside these companies, and the decisions they make. And oftentimes, it's a culmination of what they've learned, the current market and what's relevant, what's going on, the context, but also gut feel. And it's a team environment. It's a real team environment, those pressure cookers. And I've been a part of some really successful situations. In one company, we went from 3 million to 65 million in 4 years. We were acquired by the largest player in our space. I was the first marketer in, stood up the marketing program and the team, got 7 people underneath me at one point, and then we were acquired. That was a very emotional environment, to be honest. What's happening in that back office is sometimes a lot of conflict, differing opinions. Like I said, a lot is riding on those decisions. And so you have a team of people that care deeply about the outcome, and our livelihoods are at stake. So as much as it is scientific, my experience is there's a lot of emotion in there.
Yeah, I have no doubt that professionals across the spectrum and across different functions may feel that way about their company and the mission that they're on. And it certainly happens with marketing. It happens with B2B, with B2C. People get into it, and when you have so much riding on you, I think you're right. It does create a pressure cooker inside, and emotions do come into play. But where I think that I've really enjoyed talking to you and kind of interacting with you, certainly on LinkedIn and in our community, is where you see how those emotions, the human side of what we do, come to play in the actual practice of the marketer and of our companies and businesses. And it's a fascinating thing to think about, because it's not as, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not as measurable, I think is the word. It's not as necessarily as black and white, right? When you start to inject the idea of the emotional side of marketing. And to bring it down, or to kind of bring it closer to some of the things that we've talked about before, I said even in the intro, and we've talked about this, about trust and connection. And we're both friends with Brooke Sellis, who was a tremendous guest on this show and on your show. Brooke, in Conversations That Connect, it's all about the idea of vulnerability, of having conversations with your stakeholders and your customers, that are emotion driven, are far more effective and create better connections, right? That seems to be where you're coming from. So I am, I couldn't agree more with that, by the way. And I think that if you can have a grasp on, or if you're kind of approaching things from trust and from connection, you're in a good spot, or you're in a good place to kind of to take an overview of the landscape. So let me just kind of back up a little bit, because to get there, though, I think it requires a certain amount of awareness and mindfulness and empathy and experience, and you don't just get that right away. So you came out of the military, and what's the connection? What's the path? Because you went Air Force, and thank you, by the way, for your service, but Air Force straight through into the marketing world, and a lot of stuff in between. So what's your path look like, and how did you get to this point where you sort of formulated your ideas about emotion and connection?
Yeah. In the Air Force, I was an intelligence analyst. We used to fight terrorists. It was during the time of 9/11.
Oh,
So
man.
I saw a lot of really dark things, as so many that were serving then and then served thereafter in the subsequent wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Those things have an impact on you, and you get a real perspective of not just what separates us, but what connects us. So it's a very extreme environment, but you learn some lessons. And I left the military after 6 years, became a defense contractor in DC, and worked for some of the agencies there, continuing the work that I had done in the military. And so after 8 years of that, started my own business. So I came back home here to Orlando, Florida, where I'm from, started a company, and then suddenly I was the CEO, leader of a startup. And you wonder why I've spent 20 years helping startups as a marketing leader. It's because of that empathy. It's because I was in their shoes. For 4 years, I ran my company, and I was acquired by a competitor. I went through several of the stages that many startups do, and I saw how difficult that was. I knew how it felt to try and get some sleep at night with all the concerns on your mind. And so I learned in that situation that that the CEO position wasn't necessarily my favorite spot. I sold my product. I helped create the product, selling the product, marketing the product, and got really intrigued into the sales and marketing side, and sold that company and dove into sales because I said, wow, I was pretty good at selling. Let me jump into that. I didn't yet have a sense of, hey, you're a marketer. So I started selling for a couple of years. I went to Sandler Sales Institute, learned selling. And what they tell you there is that people buy emotionally and justify intellectually. So there's some truths there that salespeople know, and they interact with people on a daily basis. They're not indirectly connected like sometimes we are in marketing. They're directly connected. They're having those conversations day in and day out. So I learned from sales to listen and to really listen deeply with empathy and understanding and trying to help people. And I brought that into marketing. So when I started my marketing career, I applied those lessons. I looked at from the perspective of the CEO. I understood what my sales team was going through and what the drivers were of the business, so that as a team player, I could serve the company the best possible way. Because back in the military, I mean, I learned very important lessons. You learn leadership, and you learn team unity and discipline and resilience and mission and purpose. And so coming in the corporate world, I applied those. And I wanted to serve the customer. I wanted them to find what they were looking for. And if it wasn't us, then that's okay. Because ultimately the relationship was the most important thing.
You said so many things there that I just want to kind of pull on. I'm not sure where to start because they're fascinating to me, right? Let's start with almost one of the last things you said there, which was serving the customer and this kind of idea of service. As you figured out that service is the best way to sort of be a leader in some ways. I think that a lot of rising marketers or a lot of people in our profession don't necessarily see themselves as leaders, right? They see themselves as, kind of somebody who's doing a job to promote a brand, like they're really into the brand or they're into the idea of what they're doing, but they miss the fact that ultimately it's about connecting with people and persuading people, especially in B2B, right? You only got to do is connect with one person. And you've got to, if you're working for a company, obviously if you progress within the company, you get a team, you got to be a leader in that way. But I think when you face outward to your customers, your clients, your stakeholders, you also need to be a leader of a sort. So how can you be like, what would you say would be the kind of qualities of a good marketer who's like facing their customers and clients as a service, not only from a service perspective, but as a servant leader?
Yeah, servant leaders and great entrepreneurs do similar things, which is, they need to embody the brand, and they lead the culture. They choose the team, and hopefully they listen first and speak last, because when they speak the loudest. They need to clearly communicate and cast the vision. They need to inspire change and seek excellence and accountability in people. They show the way, so they're the example. But leaders have to sacrifice for the group. And when I spoke earlier about, doing what's best for the customer, sometimes it means not getting the sale, and that's okay. But that customer may tell someone else about you. And that word of mouth is extremely valuable. So the side benefits of taking care of people are extreme. And I think some people sometimes we reduce the importance of that. I think sometimes we think very mechanically in business. Occasionally we get behind closed doors and in these situations, and we start to think selfishly, honestly. And that's the worst thing you can do in terms of acquiring customers, in my view.
If you are self-referential to too high of a degree, maybe that's another way of saying selfish, I suppose. uh, it can't have good overall effects to those around you, to those in your circle. And how do you expect that to not reverberate out towards your customers and your clients? We talk about how, especially nowadays, where more than ever before, employees or founders or the few meager people in a startup, they are the brand as much as the product is the brand, or even more so. And that concept isn't, people pay lip service to it, but I don't think that they're really getting it. So if you're a selfish kind of, like, if you don't pay attention to if you don't listen, if you don't, approach your customers and your clients with empathy, then that's going to reflect on your brand. I mean, then they're going to think I don't want to work with those people, and I don't care about that company either. So being a servant in that respect, listening
Absolutely.
first. Yeah.
The things that work today are very much empathetic. They're very much personal branding. Even in B2B, I mean, who is the leader behind the brand? Like, who are the people and the leaders behind that brand? That is very important, because it's that authenticity and that connection that move people to want to do business these days. So, in his book Mark and Rebellion, Mark Schaefer describes a number of consumer rebellions that have taken place, and he includes one rebellion that he says is the end of control.
Mm-hmm.
So now consumers have control of a brand's reputation, and they have access to product information like they've never had before. And they want to control their personal and private data. So they've taken back control. And what that means is we need to listen to them. And, what people want to do is they want to belong. You mentioned community. Our drivers as human beings is to belong and become. And communities help us belong. Brands can facilitate communities. And so, great brands do that. And that's an effective strategy today. And if you look at the things that do work today, whether that be, community-based marketing or event-led GTM motions, why are live events so successful? Because, people just want to connect again. We've been isolated. And, I look at concerns around things like AI or, stuff like that. People basically are saying, can we trust this? Who can we trust? And so they're going to dark social, or they're going, to their counterparts and getting advice and information from people they trust. So, that's the nature of the environment that we're in. So we might as well get more human. We might as well build trust. We might as well connect with people, have empathy, be authentic, and let that be our personal brand. And if we're inside of a business, then, that business's brand is connected to those values as well.
Yeah.
People will ultimately connect you, if you are inside of a business, with back to the brand. And if sales has known this for a long time. I mean, a lot of times the major factor in a sale is the salesperson.
Yeah.
And how much you want to do business with that person. And now, personal branding is marketing's way of connecting with the customer. And so, that's the world we're in today.
Do you think personal branding, though, so it's connecting with a customer, but there's a couple sides to this, right? So we as part of the Rise community, of course, we spend a lot of time on personal brand, because I think we all understand that it's not a selfish issue. It's more like the only way that we'll all survive, as our industry changes around us, and as we move around between different jobs and different brands, or we start different businesses. The only way that we're going to really survive into the future is if people know who we are, right? As Mark says, if we're known. But that whole personal brand thing, it seems to resonate a lot more with solopreneurs and entrepreneurs and maybe writers and thought leaders, people like that, which is crazy to me. I think it should be part of, like, it should be like fundamental to every executive, every leader out there. Develop your personal brand, just on any scale, and then scale it up.
I'll give you a great example. He's been doing it for 10 years. His name is Sangram Vajre. He was a founder of Terminus, a company that does account-based marketing. Mm-hmm. And he had a podcast, Flip My Funnel, and he really started a movement.
Oh, yeah.
And Sangram invested in personal branding from day one, because he came out of Pardot, mm-hmm. and he saw marketing automation and how that played, and the slow decline in that, and how eventually consumers, all of us really, get tired of drip emails and fake communications. And so he started talking about flipping the funnel, which is to make it much more personal. And ABM was a way to change the way we sold and marketed, to go from one to many to one to one. And that was the intention there. And so he led a movement. He started a movement. He still uses the same approach. I'm currently in his peak community, and he uses the same approach. He started a new company now called it's GTM. Mm-hmm. What is it? GTM Strategies or something like that. It's an analyst firm, and he's using the exact same approach that worked 10 years ago at Terminus. It's working again right now. He went from 0 to 1 million in the first year, and he's going to continue to scale. And it's because he figured out what works with human beings. Mm-hmm. And it will; those things will continue to work as long as our brains function in the way that they do. I think of Nancy Harhut when I say that, and she says that our brains are cruising along on autopilot 95% of the time, and we want to shortcut to save calories. And so there's certain things that work with human beings and will always work with human beings, social proof, authority, autonomy, narratives and stories, reciprocation, those kinds of things. And if you can understand people, she's focused on behavioral science and marketing. Sure. Some of those things can last, even if the current method doesn't last. Mm-hmm. The approach with human beings will last.
Yeah, but and taking that back to personal brand, though, right? So to understand, of course, understanding, the way the brain works, the way that I guess the commonalities that have not changed, and the idea of flip the funnel is also kind of a major part of this. If that's sort of, I think, part of where you need to go with your own personal brand, right? So when you develop your own brand and you become known as who you are, you're then like kind of, you're selling yourself essentially. But I think tapping into that, that the needs that humans have always had, right, in an authentic and in a real way, knowing how to communicate via narrative and storytelling, understanding, that people are on autopilot 95% of the time, using some of Nancy's thinking around emotional buying and what was it? Buy emotionally and justify intellectually. It's absolutely. When you talk about like developing yourself though, and learning about your own, bringing it down to your own, what you bring to the market, right? Again, you need to ultimately get there to I guess, to reach your customers, to reach your target audiences and so on. Yeah. But going back to sort of building yourself, you mentioned, we talked about, being in the community. You mentioned you're in another community and flipping the funnel. Oh, by the way, flipping the funnel. Are you talking about the kind of the bow tie model that, kind of puts where you put the customer first and you kind of work your way back from there? Or is there a, because I'm asking because I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Joseph Jaffe on this one, because Joseph, I think he coined the term flip the funnel, 20 something years ago, with, in one of his books. And the models that came out as a result, and when we say funnel, by the way, for listeners out there who may not be familiar with it, we're talking about your standard marketing funnel where it's, it starts with like attention or awareness to interest to desire to action. And there's different ways of saying each of those stages, but that's basically it, right? The idea is of flipping that is that, yes, that is a process that people go through. But once people are, once you have your customer, your targets or your clients, right? Then it is incumbent upon you as a marketer to turn them into advocates and fans. So you flip the funnel the other way around, and now you're helping them to go through to then attract more people for you, right? And it ultimately kind of comes back as a double benefit for you,
Sangram is flipping the funnel in that he creates a movement around things that his tribe cares about first. So he takes up their problem and advocates for their problem, and then they come to him. That's what's flipping it, is that we understand, empathize with our customer and their core issues. We see what's wrong in the market. We stand up for our customer, and then our customer falls in behind and wants to be part of what we're doing. And so rather than going out to the masses, he has the masses coming to him. And so, that's the approach. But one thing I would say about personal brands, and Mark has said this in Belonging to the Brand, his latest book, but personal brands help companies become more than a product or a solution, because people add value. So, one of the things I was listening to one of your recent podcasts with Ruth Hart talking about jobs to be done.
Yeah.
And really the bottom line is that there are emotional jobs to be done. We're thinking of, the drill and the hole to put the picture up that reminds us of our children and nostalgic or better times or things we want to remember. And so we want that feeling, that emotion at the end. And so, that's what personal brands do. They connect people, and they develop emotions, and they share experiences together. And when brands can facilitate that, they become more than a product. And that's the key. That's the key today, because people do not trust companies the way they used to. They don't believe us, and they believe human beings. So we've got to switch our approach.
Yeah. And we'll get back to trust for sure, because it does all come down to that. It comes down to trust, comes down to believability, reputation, humanity, authenticity, all those great terms that ultimately mean I want to connect with you. Like if I trust you, if I hear what you're saying, if I believe you have integrity, I have an affinity towards you. I want to connect to you. And the same thing with the brand, right? If a brand can generate that trust and that feeling, that affinity comes naturally. If they try to manufacture that, people smell that, miles away.
So why did Bob Iger write a book? Why did Bob Iger come out with his values?
Yeah.
It's because he's the guy behind Disney. He was, and now is again. We want you to love Bob Iger so that you'll love Disney.
Yeah.
It's what works today. Even the big brands are doing it.
Well, it works when it works. Like there has to be, I think, if you do it right, but also if you're right to be, if you do it right, but if you're right to do it, because what I mean by that is, anybody can disingenuously try to build their own personal brand, right? Anybody can try. And, some people have, but there's a there's a personal brand that works, and there's one that deceives, and there's one that doesn't work at all. And, in the long run, if you build a faulty or false brand, it will come back to get you. But that said, the idea of building a personal brand has to be based on something solid. It has to be based on the fact that you have the right to build a personal brand. And, your right to build a personal brand, I think, is earned. And maybe I'm on a soapbox here a little bit, but, anybody from at any age can say, I want to build I am passionate about X. I believe I know more about X than anybody else. So therefore, I want to be known as the person who brings X to the world. And you start there and focus in and take all the steps you need to take. Find if that's relevant. If you're at that intersection of passion and relevance, then you're hitting something big. That said, though, I think a lot of folks do this, or brands for sure, do it for the wrong reasons, or go down the wrong path. And one way, I think, just to go back to something you were saying earlier, and I think this is what one of the things you're getting at with the personal brand is, if we understand the personal brand of the leadership of a company, or of an organization, the executives, if each of them has a personal brand that we're all aware of, we all know, then it's, first of all, it's very difficult to fake all of that. And second of all, we start to build a solid trust with those people, which then does absolutely reflect into the brand, and in a very solid way. But they have to do the same. So executives who are saying, personal branding is not for me. I'm the CEO, or I'm the COO, or I'm the CFO of a company, and the company brand is the important thing. I'll take a step back. I think that's misguided now. That's marketing malpractice if you have a CMO there who's like letting that happen, or CCO.
We're looking for integrity, that somebody is going to be consistent and reliable to their values, to their purpose, to their vision, to us, to our needs, And so when we can see the values of the human being behind the brand, we can more trust that the brand is going to be something we can take part in. And so, I think it's very important that companies today start with positioning. I follow Andy Cunningham, who used to work for Steve Jobs at Apple, Next, Pixar. And she put out a book called Get to Aha, and it's her positioning strategy. And I learned it directly from her. But she positions companies for success. So she repositioned BlackBerry after they were, a phone company into, security company and software. And that's really important. I think you've got to go through the process of understanding who you are, what your role and relevance is in the market, who you're serving, what the community around your customer is, what they value, what's relevant, where your competition stands, what is the category, things like that. That's what positioning does so well. And that's the process that companies should start with, I think, in terms of getting the mission, the vision, the values established. But you're right. Yeah. It's got to be authentic, because customers have a BS meter. Mm-hmm. And, we marketers will just pound things to death. I mean, it's like we'll use a tactic until it doesn't work anymore, from email marketing to SEO to, now content marketing, which is, sort of on life support in some, in some ways. Yeah. Some types of content marketing. Yeah. Especially with AI coming in, and it's going to be able to do it at scale. Holy cat.
Let's put a pin in that, because we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Trust is even more important in this environment. So.
Yeah. So, and trust, like, it's interesting to come at it from a positioning standpoint. I spoke with Evelyn Starr recently, and Evelyn is the author of a fantastic book called Teenage Waste Brand. And fantastic guest. You should have her on your show, by the way. But Teenage Waste Brand, she really lays something similar out where, a lot of the issues that I think come from that cause a brand to have an identity crisis, as she would say, or, to have some of the other kind of, almost like life-threatening issues that, could kill a brand in its adolescence, or steer it in the wrong direction and cause it to fade away forever. Right. A lot of that is caused by just wrong positioning. But in the broader sense, that it's not just, okay, yeah, the brand is aiming towards the wrong market or the wrong, it has the wrong kind of, looking at the wrong customers. It's really more about where the values are.
They lost their North Star. Yeah.
Where's your North Star? What, go back and redefine and agree on your values. Is this what you should be doing? Are you, and there's a whole lot of reasons why this could happen, but it's fascinating. And I think people are the same, people are exactly the same as that, and that's the fundamental concept behind Teenage Waste Brand, is that brands are like people. And I think we also have to go the other way, that people are like brands, in that, it's easy to get lost, to lose your way, to just kind of have to find a time to recenter and refocus and get a grip on your values. I have to do that regularly. So I'm sure that other people do as well, but I'm sure that brands should be doing it on a regular basis.
Seems like a factor of human beings that once we get successful, we start to change. We're not as hungry, or we're not as, careful. And that's a mistake. And that's,
yeah. We start to hang out at the wrong cocktail parties, the whole thing.
Well, I think about rock bands, the first album is just epic and inspiring, and even the second album. And by the third, once they've made it, they're getting comfortable, and they're trying it. They're not staying true. And all of a sudden they lose their audience. And, by that fourth album, we don't hear from them anymore, and,
yeah.
So it happens in music, it happens in marketing and in business. I think it's human nature.
Yeah. And this is the whole thing that I keep sensing here, is that, we can't forget the human side of what we need to bring to our clients and to our companies and to our bosses and to whoever, like as marketers and as communicators. And I realize I have a sort of habit here of saying marketers and communicators. That's mostly because I think my audience kind of considers themselves one or the other or both. But, for the sake of argument, I think we all do the same thing. Marketers and communicators are all part of the same, are all delightful slices of the same pie. But the idea, though, is that, if you're out there to persuade and convince an audience of some kind or some other that they should, or that it's in their interest to consider you, to buy your product or listen to what you have to say, then this is the world that applies to you. And you can either do it by being a jackass and throwing like ads and money in front of people, and throw money at people, and what do you expect? But throw ads in front of people and intrude on them until you annoy them into doing something, or deceive them into doing something, right? Or you can go the right way and build trust that will ultimately lead to connection. You wrote about that today on LinkedIn, trust and connection. And I have to say, by the way, if anybody out there, follow Aaron on LinkedIn, because, what's your pace? Are you doing every day or like a couple times a week? You're posting some
4 times a week now. I've made it a regular practice because, I've learned from people like Seth Godin, from Mark Schaefer, Ann Handley. They all say the same thing, which is you need to be writing on a frequency so that you develop your thoughts. Mm-hmm. And I've been, in marketing, like I said, almost 20 years with B2B tech startups. And so, how do I get some of those some of that wisdom, some of those ideas out there in a way that helps people, well,
Yeah,
I have to develop those. And so I'm doing that frequency. It's 4 times a week. And, some posts are better than others, I admit,
sure.
but I'm learning along the way, and it's helping me develop my personal brand.
So that's such a key point, and one that I fail at regularly, in that I don't write as much as I should, or as much as I necessarily want to. And a lot of that is because when I sit down to write, I take forever to do it. And all of at least I take forever to do it now. And all of the practice I've had, all of the writing I've done, the one area that I've failed spectacularly is to speed up. You know what I mean? So when I find myself, when I have found myself in times where either I've been between jobs, or in a particular fit of kind of manic, I got to get up every morning and write things. Like, that's happened before. Unsustainable, by the way, but I've tried that. And then I start to feel it happening. But it's hard for me to find the time to sit down and do it. And I know that the only answer to that is to sit down and do it, right? And do it more. That said, right, you're putting out some great content, like 4 times a week. And when you have a point of view, you're pretty bold with it. You have a good way of like putting things out there. So today, your piece was about, trust and connection, and kind of made some, you made some conclusions about, why, I guess, why trust is at a premium, and how brands are losing it. And that, that we really need to be focusing more on trust, and that trust, which leads to connection. And you said that, you called it a mega trend, right? Why do you think trust and connection is a mega trend? First of all, like, what would you call a mega trend, and like, why is that classify as a mega trend?
In Mark's book, Belonging to the Brand, he's talking about community-based marketing approaches, which are becoming very popular because they're effective. But he talks about mental health being a mega trend, particularly in the B2C consumer market. And I believe that's wholeheartedly true. In B2B, though, what I've experienced, witnessed, I'm paying attention. I, read, listen every day, trying to, stay relevant, understand best practices, learn from the community and other people. And, I keep, from different people will have different perspectives based on what, how they're traversing different challenges at their companies. And so I'm following some, pretty, pretty intelligent, pretty wise people. And you keep hearing about nonlinear buyer journeys, that now consumers have access to information. So they're showing up at any point, either very early on or very late, ready to do business. And it's extremely nonlinear. So salespeople have to adjust. You're hearing about dark social and changing attribution models. Like, we're attributing to the wrong things. So go ahead and, when you get somebody to fill out a form, or when you're a salesperson, you're asking, hey, how did you really hear about us? Not what was your last click, or your first click. How did you really hear about us? Or I mentioned community-based marketing, or event-led go-to-market motions. Why is event-led just, rising right now? And all of this is around connection and trust in my mind. So nonlinear buyer journeys is because these people are going to their sources of information first, to people they trust first, to get recommendations, their counterparts, all of that. And they show up when they are ready to take action. So, that's happening behind the scenes. And that's why this concept of dark social, which is people talking on Slack, these places that we can't track, social media messengers, group
Discord,
chat, Discord,
yeah,
we can't necessarily track those as marketers. This is the connection between why all of those things are taking off right now and are trending right now. And even the concerns around AI. When you hear the concerns, it's, How do I know this is a real person behind it? How do I know the information isn't false? Stuff like that. And even decentralization with blockchain,
Yeah.
Web3, that's a trust factor. That's hey, we've got to change the system because the system isn't working for us.
Hmm.
So let's do a decentralized system where there's we don't have to worry about who's at the top, you know, and the
Yeah.
hierarchy structure. So I see all of that. I see the underlying issues being trust. And then on the connection side, you just think about the isolation of COVID and and all that comes with that. So, people are seeking human beings and they're looking for solutions through trusted sources. We've been through pandemics, wars, school shootings, civil unrest, political polarization, economic uncertainty. It's like, we just want somebody or something we can trust, a person to connect with. And, we want to do business in that fashion. And I think we're back to interpersonal marketing. We're back to
Yeah.
people talking to people.
It's not a new concept, right? I mean,
It's a very old concept.
the new part of it is the technological enablement of all this, right? So that we can accelerate community building. So when we think about community and how it's a sort of, it's a trust magnifier or a trust filter in some ways. I mean, it self-selects to a degree, right? Because you're bringing in people, or you're hoping people are going to join your community who share a particular passion or a purpose, or a profession, or whatever. There's a common theme. So it's self-selective, and then within that, there's already a little bit of trust in the system, and you like to give people the benefit of the doubt. And depending on where you land on human nature, and this really isn't necessarily that kind of show, but you might be like, okay, people who are coming to this community, they heard about it somehow through these people. So that's one factor in favor of trusting them. They share my profession. They understand me. Okay, that's another factor in favor of profession. Oh, they're providing information out of the kindness of their heart. Okay, that's another trust factor, right? They're givers, and there are people who may come into the community who are not givers, right? Who are takers, who never contribute anything. And then there's people who are just kind of absorbing, and you have to respect that, right? And when they do say something, they say something interesting, or they just reach out and say, hey, I'm sorry, I'm in the background listening. There's all different types, but no matter which way you cut it, there's a trust equation happening here. And then, within that community, the discussions that happen, I can only speak really for Rise at the moment, because, look, I've been involved on LinkedIn for as long as LinkedIn's been around. And at first I would have called that a community, but now it's probably there are communities within LinkedIn, but LinkedIn is not a community, right? It's a lot of different communities and a lot of different lone players and nefarious individuals now thrown into the mix. There's all kinds of stuff going on there. Trust in the system is not as high, as it was. Trust in the system in Rise, extremely high, and even more so the smaller, or the more kind of connected or more closer you get. Maybe there's a distance thing look, we're coming up with all kinds of stuff here, Aaron. Write this down. There's a distance thing going on as well, maybe. So, this whole thing during the pandemic, and I wonder what you think about this, but the technology now makes distance irrelevant. You and I were on the screen, you could be anywhere in the world and we could still have this exact same conversation, So in that sense, distance is not important. But yet, when we are in proximity to one another in person, that makes a big difference. So there's still that personal touch. I don't know if those are two separate things or if they're connected, but I do know, like, hey, within Rise, there's 100 people who are all over the world, and I'm like, hey, I love talking with Frank, and interacting with Fiona and the folks who are out in, you know, in the UK and in Australia and in Europe and Yuri and whatnot, um, but I find myself kind of more interactive, I think, with the people who are closer by. Maybe it's a time zone thing when it comes down to it. But I have a feeling that if you're actually ever with each other, it changes the whole equation when you get in person.
Yeah, those bonds of connection. I think what you're describing is a digital main street. We talked about how interpersonal marketing is just as old as time. Honestly, it's going to Main Street um, and buying things from your local grocer and um, your local shop because you like the owner and you love their shop and how it makes you feel and things like that. So these communities are a safe place. We'll be accepted. We'll belong there. I can reveal myself in that place, and I can become better. I can grow. Those are all things humans seek, I think, and
Yeah.
I think this growth in live events. I have a customer right now who helps big hotels, you know, Hyatt, Marriott, Hilton. They have big venue spaces where conferences come in, and this customer of mine does event technology, and so they do it in Vegas. They do it all across the country. Big shows for
Mm-hmm.
IBM and Cisco and all mega shows, and they are seeing huge attendance, people coming back to live events, desperate for live events. And these hotels are
Mm-hmm.
investing big time in both large and small meeting spaces right now
Mm-hmm.
because because these business professionals want a place. They want to get out of their homes and they want to see people.
Yeah.
And it's where influence is happening. So you got to show up. And another person doing this is Sangram Vajra with his company GTM Partners I mentioned
Mm-hmm.
earlier.
Yeah.
But they're doing these road shows all over the country. They're going places and inviting people in the hundreds, and people just want to see each other face to face. I think there's verbal communication, but then there's a lot of nonverbal communication that you can't necessarily have.
Oh yeah, of
On
course.
Zoom. Yeah.
I mean, Nancy Hart would definitely agree with that. And, I've been trying to figure out my way through some neuroscience myself. And there is no doubt, there is absolutely no doubt. It is a fact that you miss a lot when you're not in person with somebody. You miss a lot. You miss a lot when you can't see somebody. You miss even more, when you're just listening. But then there's advantages to just having a verbal conversation like we used to have on the phone, right? You could just get on the phone and talk to somebody because you're sort of honed in on listening, and we were far more attuned to people's voices back then. But every type of interaction and communication has pros and cons, but being in person together is ultimately, nothing has yet been able to beat that or come even close. And I think you're onto something with the hotels investing in meeting spaces, because not only because people want to get back together and live events are big, but companies have shut down their offices. And guess what? People aren't that happy with being shut out all the time. They don't want to go back to an office 5 days a week, but they might want to go back 1 or 2. But that's not profitable, or that's not financially feasible for a lot of firms. So they have to close their offices. So you have your people like kind of laid out there, just like, well, all right, I guess I can deal with being by myself. But then guess what? You got to have a team meeting somewhere, or if you're not, it's not that you got to, you really should. So then what's left? The corporation or the company needs to go find some space to rent for a couple of days. What is that? It's a hotel. And it's no question hotels are going to benefit from this as commercial real estate sort of starts to have some issues.
And we've been focusing their strategy on things that help develop relationships. So that customer I told you about, it's, how can we do awareness that supports relationships? Because we
Yeah.
know relationships are built on trust, and trusted relationship drive referrals. So, we want to be present in the places their prospects look for recommendations.
Hmm.
We want to let our expertise and customer stories and trusted sources validate this customer, and then be accessible, and easily shareable in terms of messaging and all of that. So we facilitate how people buy today.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
those are some of the keys.
Yeah. I was just thinking about that article you wrote too about, how different types of, communication are trusted more or less than they were in the past. And, I remember being surprised to see that content marketing is so high on the list that, it's got a high ROI, which would indicate that it's a trusted channel. Um, and, kind of surprised me. But then if you start to talk about live events, you know, is a live event a kind of content? You could argue that it is. Does that count as if you attach a lead generation mechanism to a live event? Is that content marketing in some ways? I don't know. I guess you could stretch it and say that it could be. Um, but I just wonder. Like I was thinking about that as you're talking. That the idea that people are trusting. You said it was content marketing was highest ROI, which I'm kind of equating to trust in the channel in some ways. Content marketing, live events, email, word of mouth, search in that order, right? And then in person and social
Yeah, and
media. You
yeah,
know.
the study here. This was the chief marketer. They did a poll of 116 marketing leaders, and these were the B2B channels producing the highest ROI. And like you said,
Mhm.
number one, 62% of them said it's content marketing that's producing the highest ROI. Then live events, still email in there, but then word of mouth. We've been talking a lot about that.
Yeah.
Search is still in there, but in person. So you had live events, and now you have word of mouth, and then you have in person. So it's basically taking up three positions
Hmm.
on that list. But what's at the bottom? What's interesting is what's at the bottom. What's at the bottom is display ads. What's at the bottom now is influencer marketing, which we used to be huge, but
Yeah.
now we're going with anti-influencer marketing. There's anti-influencers. We're looking at micro-influencers, people we can really trust, because
Yeah. You
those guys,
can't buy trust.
those people were once trusted, but it was abused, so they're no longer trusted
Yeah.
because we know it's fake. Or affiliate marketing, which it's no longer trusted. They're at the bottom of the list.
People have a nose for fraud and for deception, but also for corruption. And you just there's a point at which you're just like, okay, this person is just going to try to sell me another type of makeup or another type of clothing or whatever it is. But what's in it for them? Money. Like they're doing it. They're only doing it for money. It's not because it's such a great product. And once people get past that, you know, then it's just another type of ad. And no wonder trust has been falling in that. And uh, I think that you're seeing people revert back to, oh, geez, I must have been in a fever dream thinking that this person is somebody I want to buy things from. Because, in reality, what was I thinking? I've got my friend who, my friend Aaron right down the street has the same kind of like situation as I do. I should talk to him first,
Well,
see what he thought.
we're back to Nancy Harhut. There's some of those techniques, those behavioral science techniques, that brands have been using against us. So things like trigger words, certain words
Hmm.
that inspire action, and rhyme is reason, phrases that are easily remembered are truthful. We think are truthful. Just human nature,
Yeah.
scarcity and exclusivity, FOMO, or the need to be first. So if you say there's only five left, everybody wants to go grab it. So they've been using these approaches against us, and they haven't necessarily been authentic, but they've burned their trust. A lot of brands have burned their trust. I'll give you another study, which I think is even more impressive. This one is from it's the B2B marketer sentiment study
Hmm.
from LinkedIn. It was September 2022 of 1,700 senior marketing leaders. What are the biggest opportunities for B2B marketers today? 28%, which was the top selection, said investing in building relationships and trust with customers. That was number
Hmm.
one. Number two, a chance to stay relevant and rethink our brand story. They're thinking about positioning.
Hmm.
How do we stay relevant and rethink that brand story so that we are meaningful with our customers, so we don't lose track of where our customers are? And so, we can have a role and relevance in their lives and, be able to help them. So, I see these things all pointing, to the same thing, which you mentioned earlier, which is, trust and connection are the meta trends right now. You get
Yeah.
that right, and you get a lot of other things right, in my opinion.
Maybe we can add relevance to that, So like trust plus connection plus relevance, well,
Yeah.
trust and connection may be meta trends, but if you understand trust and connection and can be relevant, you're unstoppable, aren't you?
Well, Mark Schaefer says relevance and resonance.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
those are important as well. Yep.
Oh man. I am just, we keep talking about Mark Schaefer, and everybody knows who listens to my show that I always talk about Mark Schaefer. Somebody told me that I was talking. Somebody was listening to one of my recent episodes and said, "Yeah, I heard you talking about that uprising cult." It's like so funny. It's funny because it's kind of true, except that uh, Mark is eminently human, and nobody is about to kind of nobody's about to move into his ashram with him. It's just, but it's really fascinating though when you have a group of people who are sort of like minded and saying, yeah, this shit's broken, we got to fix it, and we have a lot of ideas, and we love ideas. We love ideas. So if that means that I'm with a group of people, I spend a lot of time with a group of people who get like really jazzed about new ideas and saying, "Oh wow, we can look at what this is going to do." But then guilty. That's the kind of cult I like to be part of, especially when it's instigated by Mark, who just has his 10 books say it all. He's got a very like a worldview that's relevant and resonant, at least with me for sure. And he's also a friend. Everybody in this community becomes a friend, and that's why it's not. That's why it's just so. I think in my mind, it's so successful. But we wanted to kind of like one of the things that's been uncovered in the community, or that we've been talking about a lot, is like the things that are hitting us as marketers that are just harder. You talk about trust and connection. You dropped the AI word the other day, a few minutes ago, or a little while ago. I mean, AI is such a broad area, and even as of this recording today, OpenAI just made the ChatGPT API available, and this is major. And, by the time this is out in a couple of months' time, who knows what's going to happen? But this is the new world we live in. Last year it was Web3, and now I'm like, what? We're like, Web what? No, wait, look, what's happening with it? What's this little robot going to tell me I need to say? How can I write my? How's this? What's the email I need to write? Please, robot, tell me. That's where we're at, and to oversimplify, but it's fascinating that we're sort of all focused in this, and this is the kind of thing that we spend our time on, and and I did want to know from you, what do you think that's going to mean for trust? I mean, we already alluded to it a little bit, but there's two sides to every coin, or maybe 7 sides to an AI coin. I don't know.
Yeah. It's even more important now to differentiate with your humanity.
Mm-hmm.
If AI can automate many of the tasks, it will do them well. It will,
Yeah.
some of the things it does today is, it's a starting point. It's a phase one, but we know this thing's going to learn and grow. It's going to get better. Um, and I think there's a lot of potential. There's a lot of positive potential. I'm an optimist on this. I
Mm-hmm.
know ethically there's some serious implications of AI to humanity, honestly, and how it's utilized. But ultimately, I think it can take us a lot further than we are today. We do some things, take us a while. Things we do manually, it can help to automate and do much quicker, like scanning databases and pulling out nuggets of information. Things that humans don't necessarily want to do. I'm sorry about for coders, but, we don't need as many coders anymore if, you're using a language, a basic a coding language. It can learn that, and you tell it what you want, and it can bring it out. But on the human side of it, I was listening to the recent podcast between Mark and Jay Akunzo, and the keys for us is people still want connection to the creator of what's written or what's produced in many cases. And this is why personal branding is so important. They want a connection to you. And so you can share your lived experiences. That's not something that AI can do. You can share your vision. You can share your human feelings and emotion, back to Brooks Ellis,
Yeah.
And that's important. And that's how we differentiate. We differentiate as being more human and more empathetic. So again, if you're on the fence of whether or not, you're going to continue status quo, you got to start making this shift. Being people centric and interpersonal. It's really important. We got to survive. We have to stay relevant. We have to help our businesses, our companies succeed, help our customers succeed. And the way to do that is to figure out. And I know it's a lot of change. I know things are coming at us fast. I know we've been through a time of turmoil and uncertainty. And I understand that. But it's time to get clear on a few things. And I think if people soul search a little bit, then what we've said, during this podcast will resonate, because they know it deeply. But they've started to practice things like automation and all these things that weren't human and that won't differentiate you anymore. Because now we have robots to do it. So
essentially,
get away from that, get to the things that you do well, and let them do well what they do well. And then together we can build something even greater.
I like the way you put that, like let them do what they do well. Like you're already anthropomorphizing them. And that's a pretty cool thing. And by the way, I've been waiting to use that word for a long time. That said,
that's a great word.
That said,
did you see Bicentennial Man with Robin Williams?
Oh yes. Day? Yeah. He's the robot.
Yeah. Here we are. That's
where we are. Well, like I remember, it was a long time ago I saw that movie, but I call it my little intern, like I look at it and say, okay, you're the intern that I've hired or that I've just brought in to help make my work a day better. And I know that an intern is a double-edged sword. You're getting somebody to come in and do some of the grunt work, but at the same time, you got to teach them how to do all that stuff. So it's like, it causes a lot of extra work, but you know what? You're doing good because you are educating someone and you're starting them off on their career. Now, in this case, I'm not necessarily starting somebody off on their career, but I have somebody do the grunt work. I still have to teach them. The thing is that once I teach them, I never teach them again, just one time, and it's done. And then they can move forward. And then now I can learn more about, okay, what's the next thing I can have the intern do? And the glory of it is that this intern is going to just get better and better and better, and be able to be a very, very highly skilled unpaid worker. In a general sense, because I'm paying to use it. It's not that it's not free. Nothing's free. But if I can continue to do that, and that frees me up to do other work. Now, if I take the time that it frees me up and do nothing, then when that thing catches up and takes my job, that's on me. But if it frees me up and I can keep thinking, okay, what are the different things that I can do? What are the kind of connections I can make between, things that I might not have been able to do before, but now I can? What can I learn next? How can I then employ this or deploy this to improve something in a different way? Like in other words, how can I innovate? It should free you up to innovate. And if it doesn't, if you're just then sit back in your rocking chair and let it go, then, guess what? You're going to be gone sooner rather than later. I mean, it's like that. So you gotta, it's powerful. It's valuable. But it should be your right now, your servant. And certainly, your helper. And that's kind of the way I look at it now.
Yeah. And if you think like I do, again, I can't help but think like myself, but my biggest concern is not with the AI, it's with humanity, because the AI's intelligence is, originates in part from us.
Yeah.
And, how well are humans behaved? And, how do we treat each other, and how biased are we, and how racist even, or, Bing was pretty nasty to some people.
Oh man.
Right here.
Oh, they tried to make it that way, like people set out to push it, and rightly so. This is an important thing. You need to have people testing this properly. But it went nuts, but it's you can't say it went crazy. It's a language. It's a model. It's a language model, and it puts together answers in a predictive way that doesn't know the meaning of anything it's putting out there. It just knows that these bits and bytes belong where they are.
It's reflective of us. Isn't that reflective 100%. Of us?
That's right.
And so, what does that mean about us? And, can we improve?
Can we? I'm bullish on this, right? And I hope people don't say I'm Pollyannish, but I'm bullish. And I think it's because if you look at the history of humanity, right, it's not the most sparkling record for sure. But nothing is, right? It's more, it's over time, is there progress? Is the world better than it was? And you can always point to anomalies and blips and things that happened where, oh yeah, well, there was a war and, millions of people died. So humanity is terrible. Well, yeah, it's a terrible thing. But writ large, go back to, 12,000 BC to today and just say, what's the quality of life now? What's the lifespan now? Are we better off? What's the wealth situation? Even the poorest people in some of the poorest countries are still better off than, their ancestors were 12,000 years ago. I mean, there are some places on this earth that are frankly horrible. And I know that. So I don't want to, minimize that in any way. What I'm saying though is we need to be a little more generous with the way that we interpret history so that, we don't automatically think that we're going to just turn around and screw it all up. We have had, and we still have the opportunity to screw everything up with the push of a button. It's been that way for 70 years. Right. And we haven't quite done that yet. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen today or tomorrow. There's always a madman somewhere with a finger and a button. But that's the way it's been. Doesn't make it right. Hasn't happened yet. Carbon emissions are getting better globally. Over time. The life expectancies, apart from the COVID blip, the life expectancies are on the whole higher than they've ever been in the history of humanity, or in the measured history of humanity. So the point is, right, that we haven't wiped ourselves out yet. So I don't, I'm kind of hopeful that we are able to see, how we can use AI and any of these developments and not turn it into Skynet, but rather, turn it into an advance and an advantage for us.
Yeah,
that's my feeling.
I think it's going to be incumbent on all of us to set some boundaries and, and do it for the good of all of us. But yeah, I'm like you. I just think, there's so much negative news and, with the news cycle, the entertainment news as it is now.
Yeah.
It's harder to hear the positive stories, and we seem as humans to never be satisfied with our greater comforts and convenience and, more insights and information than we've ever had. And, technology advances and innovations in all kinds of areas, especially the medical area, as you mentioned.
For sure.
We're doing quite well. It's in the, I think it's more in the values and in the, our nature. I think that's the place to look. I think it has to start with us. It has to start at home. I think, being a civilized group of people who can work well together. We're seeing a lot of the political unrest in this country and, people at each other's throats seemingly. I think that's the problem we need to fix.
Yeah.
More so than focusing so much on the dangers of technology. That we will control the technology if we can prove we can control ourselves.
Yeah, so true enough. And by the way, even to put that in context, everybody's talking about the acrimony and the bad things happening, et cetera. I mean, we're not France, 1789. We're not like pulling people out of their homes and burning their houses and bringing anybody who makes over a certain amount of money to the guillotine. Or 1793. That's not where we are. Right? Worse things have happened to people. There have been times where there was more opposition to one another. We're certainly not, the Russian Revolution, right? The Bolsheviks and the whites. We're not there. That is when things go really horribly awry. And we're certainly not it's not 1861. It's not the North versus the South. That's not where we are. So, it's terrible. It's terrible, but it's
World War II,
it's been worse. It has been worse. I mean, that's the point. It could theoretically get worse now, but right now, I think we have to take a breath. And I think the same thing goes for marketers. I think what you're saying there, to wrap it up, applies to everyone. We need to work together, find people that we can, trust, work with together. And as marketers, it's incumbent upon us to do that for ourselves, for our brands, and for the people that we serve. And, this has been a kind of thinking person's podcast in a lot of ways, this episode. I kind of knew that was going to happen when I brought you in because of what you've been writing. And, we could go on. You were worried about going an hour. I had no fear about it. I just thought that, I just wasn't sure what direction necessarily. But I think there's so much that we need to understand and talk about with trust and with connection, and these concepts that aren't like something that you can buy from an agency, right? It's really important that we evolve these things and we develop and we talk about these things. And on that note, Aaron, any last words before we go? I just want to give you a chance to wrap up real quick. Any last words?
Yeah. I would say, to folks out there, I work from home. I have a marketing agency. A lot of us work from home that are listening to this. What's real? What's real is we want to be better neighbors to our friends, our community. For me, church. I want to be an example to my kids. I want to be a good partner to my wife, and I want to deliver for my customers every day. Those are values. And it starts there. And then we take that into business. And when we do that, the business, we can then affect the business, and the business will affect the market and customers. And I think there's a downstream. So I would say, start at home, start with yourself, take that to work, start with, go to your team, and work towards the mission and help your customers, and do it in a human way, and lead with trust and connection.
What a great summary, and it's no wonder that you're starting to make serious waves on LinkedIn with your posts, and certainly, with your business. And anybody wants to find Aaron, check out Aaron Hassen on LinkedIn. His name will be spelled properly in the episode title, but it's Aaron, Hassen. Go to aaronhassen.com to find out about marketing and what the great work that Aaron's doing for his clients. Believe it or not, he's not just an amazing thinker, he's actually a doer. And the work that he's doing is making a difference for the companies that he works with and the people that he works with. And check him out on Twitter at Aaron Hassen. And again, it's going to be available in the show notes. Did I miss any, Aaron? Is that pretty much everywhere people can find you? LinkedIn?
That's it.
Yeah.
Look at us. We're
awesome.
Over an hour. I didn't think I could do it.
Oh man, no! I believed in you. I believe in you. It's no problem for me to yap.
This side. My problem is I'm on your side usually.
Oh,
asking the question.
I think that's the thing we probably missed. Where can people see your show?
Yeah, aaronhassen.com. You
and
click on the interviews. Yeah, the interviews.
So it's all through your website. Okay, aaronhess.com. Check out the interviews. Some phenomenal interviews with Mark Schaefer, David Meerman Scott. You've had Brooks Ellis, like just some of the great names that we both know. That I haven't had Mark on the show yet, but he's been threatening to come on at some point. I definitely am ready. I between you and me, I still haven't read Belonging to the Brand. Shame on me. I know.
I'm telling Mark.
I know he knows, but I will for sure read it before the Uprising. By the time this comes out, we'll probably be past the Uprising, but I know you and I are going to go to that. We'll have a lot to say after that. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. But otherwise, Mark, Aaron, I thank you so much for coming to hang out with me for a little over an hour tonight. And, you're doing great work. Keep it up. And I'm always looking forward to your posts. Thank you so much for hanging out with me.
Thank you, Dan. This has been awesome.
You got it. All right. Thanks for listening to the Dan Nessel Show. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. People always ask me, why do I do the show? I do it for the ratings. I do it for your validation. So do me a favor. Go over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or someplace else, wherever you're listening to podcasts, and subscribe, leave a review, rate me, and share with your friends. Anything you can do to spread the word, I deeply appreciate it. Thanks again for listening to The Dan Nessel Show.